So let's discuss students with severe disabilities really quickly. An individual can be called, may be labeled a few things when they have a severe disability. Some of these terms and phrases include you may see on paperwork, meaning the 504 plan or the IEP. You may see severe disabilities, severe intellectual disabilities, profound intellectual disabilities, or multiple disabilities. And um, as it says here, doesn't someone having multiple disabilities does not mean that they're automatically severely disabled. I work with students who have anxiety and depression coupled with, let's just say, ADHD, since ADHD is the number one diagnosis in higher education nationwide. But just because they have those three diagnoses doesn't necessarily mean they are severely disabled. Of course, we look at the intensity, meaning how intense that disability looks on that person. And so their ADHD might be very, very intense or considered moderate or severe. But their anxiety and depression may not be. And so we look at everything, we being disability professionals, look at how the severity of the disability impacts their educational um, environment, development, learning process, things of that nature. So there's two types of environmental support, and and I shared this in, I believe, chapter 2, when you talk about providing support for families. And so when it comes to those individuals with severe disabilities, it's important that their supports allow for integration and independence as much as possible. Of course, as the professional, whether you're a child care provider, teacher, whatever it is, you always want to give that student an opportunity to integrate as much as possible with his or her general education peers. And you want to promote independence as much as possible. And that's also going to be based on the student's ability to, let's just say, for instance, speak up for themselves. It also could mean make sure they remain safe. So as I've shared about my son, Caleb, he's quick to let you know if he doesn't like or he doesn't want, but his ability to speak up and self-advocate, like say for instance, if he wants more water, his approach may be, depending on his mood, to be honest, it could be him yelling and cursing at you that he wants water, and then it could be as simple as him getting up and getting it himself. But let me get back to this. You have your formal supports and you have your natural supports, as we discussed in previous weeks, and they're basically the same. The formal supports are the things that are coming based off of, legal paperwork. That could be IEP, could be the IFSP, which is the Individualized Family Support Program that you would get as a parent from the regional center, which is one of the supports that's available, one of the resources, that's available to all families who have a child with a disability. The good thing to know about the regional center, just as a side note, it is only available for children from birth to 18. And actually, it's not even really 18. I want to say about 17, because at that point, you transition to another program, adult services. But in order to get the adult services, you have to have been registered with the regional center as a child. So one of the things that pops up in higher ed is parents will craft a way forward for their child in the private school setting, or maybe they're in a charter school. They might be in, public school. And then they get to higher ed and they're like, wait, we got through K through 12 just fine without an IEP and 504. Why can't we just continue to get that support? And I want the support as much as possible, and people in my position at other universities want to support as much as possible, but we have to have the documentation. And so then I turn around and ask for official documentation. They get it from their doctor if that's a possibility, but the testing is extremely expensive if a child has gone through K through 12 without support, and parents have crafted a way forward, which is fine because that's what parents are supposed to do, make a way for their child to gain access to education and things of that nature. But when you hit our higher ed, we're going to want, the Disability Services Office is going to want official documentation showing not only what the diagnosis is, but how that impacts their higher education learning. So my office, the DRC, and whether it be at, like I said, Point Loma or another school, online or not, um, we are a part of that formal support um, group. And then you have the natural supports. And these, of course, are the ones that naturally occur: family, friends, neighbors, church. You may have close friends of the family, different types of groups that you might be a part of, your child might be a part of as well, could be natural supports. So examples of functional curriculum domains are listed here. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but when we think about community-based instruction, so keep in mind we're still talking about severe disabilities. So the focus is not so much on education. Yes, we want all individuals to hopefully attain, I would say, a fourth grade education, because that's considered your basic academic education. But if you're a person like my son who doesn't have the wherewithal to gain a basic fourth grade education, then you're going to want to lean into other areas of development for the child. So that could be domestic. Now you're engaging in life skills, things that really and truly all children need to learn, regardless of their ability. How to keep a clean bathroom, kitchen, how to do your own laundry, how to make your own bed. These are like basic things that we've all been taught, or we've seen, or who knows, we may have someone in there who has, a maid and a butler, and I guess in that case you're not worried about cleaning bathrooms and laundry rooms, but you've seen it. And for the rest of the world, these are things that we just need to know how to do. And in the kitchen, it goes beyond just obviously just mopping the floor, but it could also mean washing dishes, unloading the dishwasher. I mean, there were little things my son could do when he wasn't angry, like unloading the dishwasher or even loading the dishwasher. He took a lot of pleasure in being able to stack them in there the way he wanted to, and put the little packet in there and things of that nature. So that was cool until it wasn't cool anymore to him. And so then it became, I would ask and it would become behaviors, but that's another conversation for the autism chapter next week. Community. Like I shared in previous weeks, we talked about community-based instruction. And so you want to give students with severe disabilities an opportunity to engage in some of their strategies, educational, behavioral strategies in the grocery store, the bank, if that's, something that they're working on, post office, restaurant, school. I think it's great, especially when my son was in middle school at PB Middle, that the school was intentional about creating good relationships with Sprouts, with the taco shop. I cannot remember the name of it, but just that rapport. It gave not only the students a great opportunity to be out and be among, general public, like people, but it also gave the workers there an opportunity to, engage with individuals that they probably wouldn't engage with on their own, if left to their own choices. And so there's a learning experience there for everyone. And, the children are learning, communities learning, they're becoming more aware, they're becoming more sensitive to the needs of those with disabilities just because they're out integrating with the public. Recreation and leisure, once again, you want to have individuals with severe disabilities out and about, engaging in things that their peers would be engaging in. My son's 21. I was going to say 22. He's 21, and he loves going to the YMCA to work out. He loves going to see movies, and he loves to bowl. He likes going out to Lake Murray, and he doesn't have the patience, to be honest with you, with fishing, but he just loves being in nature. And so it's just, once again, they always choose, just when they do community, just like when they do community stuff, they choose days and times where it's off peak. Of course, right now we're dealing with pretty much everything being off peak, but when things were open and doing what we normally do, it will be off peak hours. So they get a chance to still integrate with the community without having to worry about the crowds of the community. And then vocational, having specific job sites. My son's first job was at Petco, because he was at Mission Bay High School briefly, and they got him a little day job just for a couple of hours a week at the Petco, which I honestly don't know if it's still there anymore, but it was over in like the Bayho area. and all he was doing was front-facing products. But once again, this is something that the average 15 and 16-year-old would do anyway. Their first job would probably be retail or working in a restaurant or maybe working at the grocery store. And so having that opportunity to engage in things that the average child would do. I'm cautious to say normal, but you know, skill areas that can also be addressed in these domains: communication, transportation. So you're integrating, as a teacher, as a child care provider, you're integrating a lot of their skills that they need to work on in these functional domains. And so it's helping with not only their critical thinking, but it's also helping with their decision-making skills. And you're learning, just like they're learning, their likes and dislikes, their wants, their needs. And they're also using their peers, as my son did often, to kind of govern their behavior. So if they saw Johnny, to pull back on our imaginary student again, when he walked into the library, Johnny got really, really quiet. And so you may do like a quick social story on why it's important to be quiet in the library. And so instead of, say, for instance, my son hearing me say, "Oh, Caleb, you have to be quiet, we're in the library," which is guaranteed to give me the opposite of what I just, said, I could always turn to Johnny and be like, "Oh, Johnny, thanks for being quiet," and I'm modeling by lowering my voice, but "Thanks, Johnny, thanks for being quiet. We're in the library, we have to talk like this." And so Johnny, in this case, would be the role model student, and he would in turn, possibly respond back to me in a whisper as well. So the compliance is a lot higher because I not only modeled the behavior, but then Johnny, reciprocated it back. So it's just kind of like, well, he reciprocated, you don't say reciprocated back, reciprocated. And as a result, in that particular instance, my son would basically mimic what Johnny did. Not so much me, but Johnny, he would definitely listen to or model after. The guidelines for developing functional communication systems. So when you have a person with a severe disability, that may mean that they are partially verbal, meaning they may not have the verbal skills to give you back the information, say for instance, the same manner I'm giving it to you. They may have processing delays, or they may be completely nonverbal, meaning they may not understand what you're saying and they can't give it back, or they may understand completely what you're saying, which I believe is more often than not. And they don't have the wherewithal to give it back to you. So my son's speech and language, his speech is delayed, but his language is not. And so his understanding of language is actually, he's been tested a few times. It's a lot higher than his age range. But his ability to speak what he understands is severely below his age level. So as a result, in the past, people have made the mistake of thinking just because he can't, express himself, that he obviously doesn't understand. And it's quite the opposite. He understands everything you're saying. My son even understands sarcasm, which I appreciate because I'm a sarcastic person. And he has a sense of humor, and he jokes around and things. So once we realized that he truly understood, we started telling everyone so that they can be aware that, when you're talking about him and his skills and his levels and what he needs to do or his behavior, he's understanding everything. And of course he had teachers who didn't believe me. And I'm like, yeah, well, he came home and told me, Caleb's stupid. Yes. We tried out having my son in a Montessori school when we lived in New Orleans. And we figured, oh, okay, we'll try the Montessori approach because he's really not a pencil and paper type child. And I was like, well, this will allow him to be creative and, kind of govern his day and things of that nature. Well, the Montessori school took him, and that was great because I thought that was going to be the biggest hurdle. But at the time, I didn't understand that my son's autism really does require him to have a very strict routine, and it needs to be daily, and he can't be left to his own devices because Caleb and free time don't go well. And to be honest with you, autism doesn't go well with free time, whereas in the average child would be like, great, I don't have any responsibilities today, I can do whatever I want. Those on the spectrum really do need that routine. And in my son's case, he needed it as well. So I got away from the point of the slides. Let me bring it back in. But when you have functional communication systems for individuals like my son with severe speech delays, or those who are nonverbal, you want to put in place things that are going to help them communicate. So that could be using an iPad, and maybe having them type out what they need to say if they have those skills, and having the iPad or the computer speak for them. Nowadays, you can even have, what is it, the iPhone 10X or 10 Plus. Well, they've gone onto a different iPhone, but their screens are bigger. So some people are even using that, and they'll type out what they want in, say, for instance, Notepad, and then they can have their screen reader read it for them. There are apps that can speak for you. You can string together a whole story based off of pictures. And one communication system is called the PECS system, PECS, and it stands for Picture Exchange Communication System. And there are these little square pieces of paper with little like stick figures, and they're doing things. And so it might show them washing face or peanut butter and jelly. And so the student can take that to not only use for as a chore or a task list, which we use for my son, but they can also use it to string together sentences and communicate for them, because you want the child to be able to express, if they're able to, as much as possible, their needs and their wants and their desires. Not only does it help you as the caregiver to better address their needs, but it also helps them feel heard, you know? Can you imagine what it would feel like having someone constantly speaking for you? Just the thought of that is annoying, right? So think about that when you see someone who's completely nonverbal. Take into consideration there's a possibility, strong possibility, they can understand everything. They can understand voice inflections. They can understand, of course, facial expressions if they have sight, things of that nature. Your body positioning, it's all the things that you would take into consideration with anyone. And those with disabilities, severe disabilities, deserve the same respect that you would give someone who doesn't have a severe disability. Then there's normalization. That good old word. It's from the 1970s and 1983, so then there's that. But normalization, think generalization. You really want them to be able to engage in activities that are quote unquote the general/normal things that people are already doing. Whether that's going to, if San Diego was a big football town, and there might be people in here with the San Diego State was like, how dare you say that? Well, in the South we have football towns, and I'm going to use Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as an example, because you think Baton Rouge, you probably didn't even, if you're into sports, I automatically think LSU. So LSU is Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is LSU. And so it's a huge football town. There are other universities there, but they don't matter because it's LSU. So if Johnny is in Baton Rouge and wants to go to a football game, he should be able to do that because that's what's happening on a Saturday night. It's very typical for there to be a huge football game taking place during football season, of course, in Baton Rouge. So he too should have an opportunity to engage in these things just like, his peers and his family members. And so as a result, LSU would need to do things to have things available for people with severe disabilities. So if the crowd is an issue or the noise is an issue, of course, it's going to be up to Johnny and his family to provide, something to help keep his ears covered, or, even having a separate area. So there's things that can be done, and of course it does require a lot of planning. So if people are not planners, this could be a problem. But with proper planning, as the saying goes, you can prevent poor performance. And in this case, prevent the possibility, there's a lot of P's there, I'm saying, prevent the possibility of Johnny having a meltdown or an episode that could have been avoided if strategies have been put in place for him to be able to truly enjoy the event. Let's see. And then lastly, we have transition programming. So one of the resources that you can include in your manual that will be really great for any transition, and really for any student once they reach, I want to say 10 or 11, as they get ready to go into junior high and high school, is the Department of Rehab. You have the Department of Rehab, which is through the federal government, and you have the Department of Vocational Rehab. Department of Vocational Rehab provides services for individuals with all types of disabilities. And it can be those who are in college. They'll help with pay for part of your college education, provide you with a computer, printer, everything that you need. Not everything, but the basics that you need for getting your college degree. But it also can mean providing aid services, aid as in AIDE. And so we do have some students who are severely disabled, and they have personal aides who attend class with them to help with them remaining on task. They also help with, say for instance, taking notes. And this could be an accommodation that they're receiving through the DRC. But once again, we don't want them to sit there in class and just listen. We want them to practice taking notes. So if that's done on paper and they're, maybe the aide may give them like a Cornell sheet and they have to write one side and then the aide may write on the other side, or it might be be done in a Google Doc, because we do have some students with disabilities that affect their ability to hold the pencil for a long period of time, and so typing works, and so they'll sit there and they'll type their notes. And you want to just give them that opportunity, but the aide is there to assist them in not only just catching the bus to get to Point Loma, but they, in some cases, arrive at the person's house ahead of time. Then they catch the bus, or they take the aide's car to campus, and so they're going through all the steps, but they're there working with the, one-on-one with the student. Department of Rehab is Vocational rehab is always, ALWAYS, always in need of personal aides. So if you're looking for a job and you are looking for an opportunity to work with individuals with disabilities, you can definitely look into that. I don't know anything about the pay, but I do know that between them, as well as in different agencies and organizations in San Diego right now, are looking for behavioral specialists. And these are people who work one-on-one with an individual with autism or some other severe disability, and they work in the home. And some places even have them coming back to agencies and working as well. But it's the whole transition piece. And so the transitioning, you definitely want to have a plan. The TIEP is the Transition Individualized Education Plan, focuses solely on what this looks like as the student is transitioning out of, say, junior high and transitioning into high school. What other strategies are needed? What are the things we need to think about? When my son was transitioning from elementary to sixth grade for PB middle, elementary, they don't change clothes for PE. They don't even change classes in most cases. But here we're in middle school now, and there's changing of classes. So he's got, he's got his main special education teacher who was phenomenal. And then you have like band, and you have art, and you have PE where you have to go into a locker room. So it's like all the little things. So you want to take that into consideration when you're creating the transition program. And so I talked about between levels of school. It could be from segregated to integrated, because for those children who are, say for instance, in having a 504 plan, and maybe they've done their academics in the special education setting, then they may be transitioning to where they've done really well in, say, I don't know, say math. And so since they've done so well in math and they're pretty much now functioning and performing at the same level as their peers, you can put in as the parent or as the teacher, say, hey, once again, Johnny's doing great in math in my special education classroom. I'd like to see him try it out in Mr. Jones's, gen ed class. And so now the TIEP or the IEP needs to be amended to include him being Johnny, spending time in Mr. Jones' gen ed math class, so that he gets used to it, becomes aware of the behaviors, because of course classroom management is big across the board, but classroom behavior is definitely more of an issue. And I say issue as in something that, there's a standard and you must meet it in the general education setting, whereas in a special education setting, depending on the nature of the disabilities in the classroom, it might be overlooked if a person starts to yell out of frustration, because that might be the way a certain disability looks on that person. Yelling in a general education classroom will get you kicked out probably almost immediately, if not by the time you finish your yell. So make it worth it, because you're going to get kicked out and there will be a punishment. Whereas in the same behavior in a special education classroom may come with warnings and things of that nature. But if it's something that's a part of their disability, say for instance Tourette's, you can't turn around and punish them if this is the way their disability has manifested in their life. And then transitioning from school to work kind of goes without saying as well. And this wraps up chapter 7. We went over transition programming, went over different things that can be done in the community to help integrate their education program. And we talked about also functional curriculum domains and how it's important that the skills that they're learning are generalized. And we talked about the different terms that those with severe disabilities can be referred to as. Thank you.